This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining to today's webinar, Data Optimization of Secondary Raw Materials from Batteries and Vehicles in Europe. My name is Michelle Wagner and I will be your moderator today. I work in the United Nations University as a research associate, and alongside my colleagues, we are excited to be hosting today's session. Today's webinar, we will be addressing both the battery and vehicle sector. And the battery section will be presented by Johanna Emmerich. She is a research fellow at the Technische Universität of Berlin since 2014. She holds a master's degree from the Humboldt University of Berlin and has expertise in environmental resource management. In the past years, she has been working in numerous H2020 projects and has been compiling battery data along the product value chain to optimize knowledge on critical raw material flows and to improve as well battery reporting practices for the future. In this section of the webinar, she will be providing an overview of harmonization options and guidance to stakeholders who are involved in the reporting of batteries put on the market and waste collected to obtain input on efforts to align in various battery classifications between member states. For the second part of the webinar, we will be presenting an overview of the availability of data for informing circular economy policies related to passenger vehicles in Europe, mainly highlighting the data gaps and options for improvement. Many issues in view of recent and ongoing technological trends. And this section will be presented by Amul Löweg, Maria Jungerein Soderman, and Yuan T. van der. Amul Löweg is a postdoc research at EMPA, the Swiss Federal Laboratories for Material Science and Technology, and his research revolves around modeling of societal material flows and recycling of metals from passenger cars. Maria Jungerein Soderman is an associate professor in sustainability materials management at Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden. And in addition, she conducts research, supervises, and teaches in circular economy. And Johan Tivande is a research engineer in the Department of Environmental Systems Analysis of Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. His main areas of research are life cycle assessment and environmental informatics. Before starting with the presentation, I would like to present a few housekeeping items to cover both the presentations and the GoToMeeting webinar platform. First, we would like to ask everyone to mute your microphone by clicking the microphone button as displayed in here. And in doing so, we will be avoiding having background noises and ensure that we can hear clearly our presenters. In addition, we would like to record this webinar in order to allow participants that could not join us today to have access to this webinar. And this webinar as well will be available in the ORAMA webpage as well as the presentations. And we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to ask them after each presentation, or in case you feel more comfortable, you can as well send them through the chat box in the player. And lastly, we'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks. You can use the social sharing icons in the ORAMA website to post this webinar directly on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And to kick off the webinar, I would like to talk a little bit about our project. ORAMA focuses on optimizing data collection for both primary and secondary raw materials across member states, and it mainly addresses specific challenges and possible solutions related to data availability, geographical coverage, accessibility, standardization, harmonization, interoperability, quality, and thematic coverage. This project is built on results of past and ongoing projects, of which maybe you already have heard of. In the case of primary materials, it will be the Minerals for EU, MICA, and secondary materials as well, PROSUM. And its main aim is to demonstrate how to create more robust primary and secondary stocks and flows data sets in the EU and make information accessible and compatible with JRC's raw material information systems. If you want to know a little bit more of the project, please feel free to check the ORAMA website. And we will start our first presentation of the webinar with Johanna. So Johanna,
yeah. Hi. Can you see my screen?
we see your presentation, but you haven't, yeah, there. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for this kind introduction. Yes. So I will start the webinar on the material flows of batteries in Europe. And I would like to start with a very brief introduction to the topic. We can say that in a world with limited resources, we need to know how much resources are we using, how fast are we extracting our resources, where do they go, and ideally how long they will last, they will stay in the products. And besides the environmental relevance of critical raw materials, they also have a strategic importance for the European Union. And this is one of the reasons why this project was triggered, because we need reliable data in order to for policymakers and other stakeholders to make informed decisions. So why do we need better data on the batteries? When we talk about the battery market, we can say that the fast-changing battery technologies are causing significant shifts in resource demand for very strategic metals such as graphite, cobalt, copper, but also lithium, manganese, nickel, lead, and zinc. Conducting material flow analysis for certain elements is very important to work against potential shortcomings in the future. In the graph below, we can see, this is taken from the Urban Mine platform, the massive increase in battery cells in the coming years, divided up in the different applications. We need better data also because we need to calculate realistic collection and recycling targets. And if we want to improve collection and recycling volumes, it's also important to know where are some of those flows going, why are they maybe not coming back. So also for collection and recycling volumes, having better data on battery is crucial. In ORAMA, we work towards improved data sets of CRM flows and batteries. We can say there's 3 steps. We did an inventory of the available battery-related data sources. We screened the data collection methods of member states. I will go more into detail in a bit. And then in the end, we formulated some recommendations and worked out a case study also. There's a growing interest in the term big data. It's in everyone's mouth, and indeed we are dealing, or we have to deal with a large volume of data in the future. And it's really amazing what kind of data you can find out there. Google can tell us exactly how much beer we drink per capita, per country, per year. However, it's very, very difficult to find knowledge on product life cycles and to know where and when complex products, for instance, reach end of life. So as a researcher in environmental engineering, interested in critical raw materials, I'm interested in how much is inside, the mass flows, the return flows, what's coming back and how much. So from my side, there's a big gap, a knowledge gap on what kind of data we can find. I did a search on what's the battery waste per household, and this was one of the first graphs that popped up, and I made it bigger to show you that this is from 1992. Very strange. There's of course also other good papers, such as the paper by Jean-Paul Viau, but also when you look at it, it's from 2001. So it's very, even if there's relevant methodological insights, it will hardly be used anymore today, the numbers. So we can see a big data gap on environmentally relevant and statistic data. And there's, maybe more importantly, there's no standardized data format to work with. Yet to be fair, there's also some very good data sources out there, such as this report by Acurec, where there's a very accurate data on the battery flows. This is a good example, and still from 2018, so it's quite recent still. Also this graph, also by the same report, where even the different applications are being split up. So there's also very good data out there, but yeah, it needs some time to find it, and it's not enough. We worked for 3 years on compiling all the data that we could find. Not all of it was publicly available data. We had some expert involved and several interviews, and also some confidential data was shared to build up the Urban Mind platform. Some of you might know it already and has maybe even worked with it a little bit. There's also definitely room for improvement, but it's still, I would say, one of the most sophisticated data collection when it comes to battery flows in Europe, at least what I know. This is an overview of the data sets that we used. It's a mix of several variables that we combined. There's data in place on the markets, where we try to use official data from national authorities, from the member states, but also from industry associations. It's a broad mix. We've used average weight, the lifetime, we calculated the stocks, and we can see that there's a big discrepancies between already the number of records that we used. So for instance, on the lifespan, there's very, very little data. Also on the measured stocks, there's hardly any surveys out there that can tell you the number of batteries that people have stored in their home, for instance. And also the missed throws, so the waste in municipal solid waste. There's very little data on that. So one of the reasons why the data situation is as it is because the legal reporting requirements do not meet the information needs of today. As you know, the reporting obligations concerning batteries are regulated by the Battery Directive. Oh, sorry, do you keep seeing my GoToMeeting? No, okay. And the Battery Directive is distinguishing only between 3 types of portable batteries, the lead acid, naked, and other batteries. The directive does not provide legally binding requirements on the data collection methods. So for instance, on the level of detail of the reported data to the Commission. And this is why member states collect and publish the data very, very differently. And there's a changing level of detail. And we need to change this level of detail to assess the CRM flows in the urban mine. So updating of the current battery classification or a proposed update is what will be presented here later. Okay, now I can move. Yep. So this is an overview of an evaluation that we did of the EPBA report, where we looked at how member states are indeed reporting their battery data, and we can really see several inconsistencies and a huge lack in harmonization. And the weakest data coverage regards the stocks and the lifespan, but also the waste flows and even the place on the market. Some of the member states don't report any numbers at all. Some in a higher level of details, some in I would say moderate. This is a classification that we did. And some in a very low level of details, merely only in volumes, where you cannot say at all what type of batteries, not even to speak about the CRM content. And this makes it very, very difficult to give any kind of reliable information on the CRM flows that come from batteries. So we can say that the lack of mandatory verification process and the minimum data checkup requirements at member states level before submitting the data remains a problem. There's several significant inconsistencies, and the data reporting on European level could be optimized towards a more reliable and harmonized information base on the flow of CRMs from batteries. We also saw that Eurostat statistics in its current states is not designed or structured to describe material contents or flows. This is an exercise we did for the JRC, where we updated the battery data, and I extracted only the cobalt flows. So this is the numbers you see here is the tons of cobalt that are in the two main lithium-ion batteries groups. We can see what's being placed on the market. We can see how big the stock is and the different applications within the stock. The waste generated, which is almost as 2,700 tons. And from that, the number which is being collected, and this is what's being reported, which is 233 tons. And it leaves us with a large number of more than 2,500 tons cobalt where we don't know where they are. We call it unknown whereabouts. And this might be because of misreporting. It might actually be collected, but it wasn't reported. It might be because of misthrowing. Illegal exports, scavenging, is it still in stock, hoarded at home? We just don't know because we don't have any data, but this is a huge amount, and it shows very nicely the dilemma and the problem that we have when we talk about CRM flows and missing data. Even more data lack is when it comes to the composition data of batteries. So here we have different cobalt contents, different sources. Each has different sources. I think the newer sources have a bit of a lower cobalt content, and we calculated with 14%. But now if you move this up to, let's say, to 20%, of course, this amount down here, the losses is even more. So what I want to show with this exercise is that we're dealing here with very, very high uncertainties when it comes to the numbers. We developed a battery classification list. It was also proposed to the Commission and proposed in the ongoing talks on the revision of the battery directive. It's a lot of information. I know it's we don't need to go into detail, but it's the general structure is that we have the battery keys. We have the chemistries, so the short names, the main chemistries, and then we have the application. And these classifications, or if batteries could be classified in this way, it would give us a more precise indication on the CRM content, on the lifespan, on the weights, and it would make stock and flow analysis much more reliable, so to say. If you have any feedback on this, I'm very happy to go back to it at the end of the session. We also conducted a case study on the electric vehicle batteries, since the sector is contributing significantly to an increasing demand for high performance batteries, and they are responsible and will be in the future even more for a large consumption of CRMs. The market is growing, and also there's a diversification in applications. So we see more and more large lithium-ion batteries in, for instance, heavy and commercial vehicles and drones, buses, trucks. Yeah, the graph also shows nicely these are assumptions, predictions that we did for the UMP. When we look at the system of an XEV, we call XEV stands for any battery or plug-in electric vehicle. We see there's a bit of a difference between, let's say, a normal battery, because we have the battery manufacturer, it's being integrated into the vehicle. We have the vehicle placed on the market, then we have the use. And then we have the extraction of the battery, and then we have several intermediate stages that the battery can go through, because if an electric vehicle battery is replaced, it might still have a high capacity of about 60 to 80%. So it's very likely that there will be a preparation for reuse elsewhere before it will reach end of life. And this also means that the battery will be in stock for probably a longer period of time, and recyclers don't know when they will come back, and second-hand users don't know what kind of battery they're dealing with, because normally it's hard to tell. So we see several problems here with the current reporting, because there's no reporting obligations on the intermediate stages. So it's a big, we can say, black hole from when the battery enters until the battery gets out of the system again. Also, the chemistries have different technical trade-offs that have to be matched. So when a second-hand actor gets back a battery and wants to determine what's the optimal second use, it's important to know what kind of lithium-ion batteries he or she is dealing with in regards to durability, performance, lifespan. Is an important piece of information. We can say that there's very little data found on the intermediate stages of the XEV value chain. There's a lack of reporting obligation, and this might be one of the reasons. There's very high uncertainties on the return flows due to several second life options. It might take much longer for the battery to come back. And the thing is, we don't know how long and why. And as just mentioned, the information in battery chemistry will determine the lifetime of the battery, the time frame when the batteries will move from stock in use to battery replacement, second use scenarios that are possible, and what would be the optimal second use scenario that for the battery that's been being replaced. So for all of this, improved information on what type of chemistry, a labeling or a classification might help. So some of the recommendations that we would like to present from the case study is that we would like to recommend that extending the reporting requirements to better monitor second life batteries from the vehicles, to monitor the stock and flow levels and the ages of the batteries. And the second one is, in order to give reliable predictions of the future supply needs, we need to develop classification systems that allow member states to categorize the electrochemical battery subsystems better and in a harmonized way, so that we can compare and do cross comparison between the member states. It's important to establish a harmonized framework for batteries placed in electric vehicles to identify the potential for them for reuse and remanufacturing. And besides all of that, it's important that we maintain this knowledge and update databases and make this data available for the public in forms of platforms or even Eurostat, if could be, it could be a good place for this. Maybe just not in the current format. We can see that the batteries are quite already able to record some data. So for instance, notebooks and tablet batteries are able to report their state of health. So the question is, can all batteries do that? How is it done? And of course, another very important question, who has access to the data? How beneficial is this and for whom? And we could ask furthermore, is it possible to record, lifetime of a battery and even the chemical type of the battery? So extend this data recording. Yeah, so in this case, it's a colleague of mine who's looking at the state of health and how this has been tracked, and some tablets and notebooks, they do that already, just to demonstrate this. Coming close to an end, so who would benefit from an urban mine place? So we have the industry actors, the users, the recyclers, the manufacturers, the second-hand actors, of course. We have policymakers, people who need to make decisions, who need to decide on recycling rates, member state statistics, Eurostat, and the research community, universities, consultants, all of those would benefit from having more reliable and open access information. So coming to the general recommendations, some of them I've already mentioned. So besides amending the battery directive as we proposed with the classifications and requesting a high level of detail, another important aspect is enforcing the compliance of the member states by, for instance, third-party audits. Are they reporting correctly? How reliable are their numbers? This is currently not being done, and we think that it would also benefit the overall quality, of course. We would also, maybe the last points down here, just to save a little bit of time, it's also important to better monitor the battery stocks and the unaccounted waste flows. So knowing how many batteries are in the households, why are they staying there, when are they coming back? This is very little out there, and so that we could maybe adapt the stock and flow model a little bit and intervene, know where to intervene and how. How many batteries are ending up in municipal solid waste? There is some papers out there, but we need more, and we need samples and sampling protocols to be also comparable across the countries. So as a last slide, conclusion and key messages. As I said, informed decision for policymaking must be based on solid data, valid information on the market trends, the battery composition, the CRM concentration, the lifespan, the turnover time, and the huge amount of unknown whereabouts. In Europe, needs to, flows is important to move towards a circular economy in Europe. And if we don't know the whereabouts of batteries, the material flows, the magnitude, if we don't know what's coming and where to make the effort, it will be very difficult to move to circular material flows. Yes, as a concluding sentence, so to say. So that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention and for letting me finish without interrupting. if you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for your excellent presentation. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. So if you have any questions, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Hi, this is Daniel Müller from NTNU. Thank you, the very nice presentation. Really clear, and you pointed out so in a clear way the big problems and also what you have achieved. Really impressive. I have one question, and that is related to the term placed on market. That is in combination with the lifetime to calculate the in-use stocks.
Yes.
And my question is, how do you define placed on market? Is this what is actually sold within a country? Does this include the trade flows? Some of the products that are placed on market are exported and others might be imported. Can you define more clearly what you mean with the term placed on market and how you consider the trade flows?
Indeed, we placed on the market is what is being sold in the national markets. However, it could very well be that there are double countings. It cannot be ruled out. Yes.
Also, if you have from the same product category trade flows, did you assume that the trade happened before the sale or after the sale? Also, on the
sorry.
As an example, vehicle sales, yeah. You have the vehicle producers, and then you have a trade of vehicles, and then you have the importers and so on, and then they are sold on within a specific country. Did you still consider the trade flows, or
we had a different
that the placed on markets include already the trade flows, that this is already accounted for?
We had a bit of a different approach. We had international sales of batteries, very detailed ones. And then we had some indications of the European market share. And then we broke it down to the national shares of within Europe. Okay. And then we did cross checks with the different, for instance, with the vehicles, with the vehicle team. And we looked if the numbers sort of add up and match, and where not, we looked again. So it's kind of a plausibility checks that we did. And this is really the order of magnitude that we are dealing here with, because the data availability doesn't really allow for more detailed approaches, even though there might be other approaches, and the one you mentioned sounds quite reasonable as well. For Prosum, we had a different approach because we had to work with the data that we got.
Yeah.
And there was no trade data, I think, involved there. No, it was based on the market share of the individual countries within Europe.
Okay. Yeah. And you assume the uniform distribution in Europe, no? Also that it's the same market share. Is this correct?
No, it wasn't the same market share. No, we had a little bit more accurate. I think we could go there, but we also had some with Eucobet was part of the consortium, luckily, and Recharge, and many of the assumptions that we took were taken together with them also. So it was a group of stakeholders that agreed on certain market shares. So we could maybe call it that. And then went back to the original numbers and cross-checked with the other product groups. Yeah. So it was it sounds, and it was really complicated, but this is how we worked. Yeah.
One related question, if we look at the battery stock, we have, of course, batteries that are placed on the market, and we have products that are placed on the market. How did you differentiate the two? Did you look only at the batteries or both?
We only looked at the batteries, but as I mentioned, we closely worked with the product groups within the project who focused on the products.
Yeah.
And we checked how feasible is it. So for instance, it's okay if there's a bit more batteries than actual products on the market, because batteries might be replaced in certain applications, while in others it's not very likely. And if the products are higher than the batteries, then we have a problem. So this is what I meant with plausibility checks.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the lifetime, you assume then that the battery lifetime is the same as the product lifetime?
No.
No?
No, the lifetime data was, we were lucky to get data for actual sampling data, where really batteries were taken out of the waste stream, and look how old they were. Nevertheless, we cross-referenced some of that data also with a lifespan of the products. Again, that was done in several loops with stakeholders discussing, how reliable is this, and is this number realistic or not? Because there is no right or wrong. It's basically asking stakeholders who've been in the field for a long time. So is it realistic that a cordless tool will have a battery this old, or will it last so long? And this is how you move from application to application, and you work with what you get, basically. But it was a mix. It was a mix of sampling data, so first-hand data, and stakeholder consultation.
Yeah. That means that you were kind of reconstructing the lifetime, if you understand you correctly, based on data that you have from observations and combined with stakeholder interviews.
It was data that we received from a sampling exercise of different compliance schemes within Europe, where it was initiated by UCOBAT. We got the data, and there they checked how old were the batteries in the waste stream.
Is this somewhere available, the way how you derive the lifetimes? The methodology and the data, or is this?
I'm afraid that was confidential. I don't think I'm allowed to share that, but we are thinking of publishing a paper where we would like to exactly publish things like that, because that's also useful information, which is not easy to find.
Yeah, that would be very useful. That if other groups come up with different results, that we can reflect together what could be reasons,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. And a last question, because of the time, Eliu Pasi would like you to go back to the slide from the cobalt flows. And he is asking, what does the comma mean in the numbers, thousand separators or decimal indicator? Is it like a comma, like a 3,158.15?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yeah.
he is also asking whether the market growth is at 25%. Is that the annual growth?
You mean of the EV?
Yeah.
This one?
Yes.
I think it's okay. Yeah, I need to check that again. I think it's no, I don't think it's annual growth.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Johanna, for your excellent presentation. And I am now pleased. We will give the moderation to our to Maria. She will be our second speaker, and she will be initiating the vehicles section of the webinar.
Yeah. So let me just check. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Maria Ljunggren Söderman from Chalmers, Sweden, and I will be the first of the 3 speakers on vehicles today. And I will start by explaining some of the implications, some of the observations that we have made because of we have done these types of studies, and some of the implications that would be relevant for policy and industry decisions. So first illustrating this, and then we will come back. The next presenters will talk a bit more about the data collection and the data availability. So for me, it was very interesting to find out that already before the expected growth of electric vehicles, which we hear a lot about, so focusing a lot on the batteries and also on the electric motors, we see that many critical raw materials in vehicles and in EEE, electrical and electronic equipment, are in the same order of magnitude. And this has not been shown very much and hasn't got a lot of attention. And I believe that this is because this belongs to or is linked to technology development that is a bit under the radar. It is going on in the hidden, so to say, and it is not linked to any radical technology shifts such as electrification, but it's still happening. And since this has not received a lot of attention, the knowledge is not there. The industry and the policymakers, they don't know that these elements, these metals are in vehicles. And to my knowledge, very little, if any, of these 3 elements that I'm showing now, gold, neodymium and niobium, are recovered at end of life. And presenting results like this could actually give incentives to other types of actions so that we can use secondary raw materials in a better way. How did we then do this? How did we arrive at these types of conclusions? Well, as Johanna said, we were also part of previous projects such as ProSum. And in that project, we decided to go out and map metals and which metals we could find and where we could find them in light-duty vehicles. So restricting ourselves to passenger cars and vehicles below 3.5 tons. And based on our own research in Switzerland and Sweden and findings from a few other research groups around the world, we found that we found 28 metals that we could account for in a sufficiently good way. And we could also identify them to 3 types of occurrences. So we could find them in components. So at the right-hand side, you could see catalytic converter, and there we could map 5 elements. For the EV motor magnet, 3 elements. And also the battery cell. And then we could see that a lot of these metals, 16 of them, belong to electric and electronic systems in vehicles. But there it was much more difficult to distinguish between specific components, so that was regarded at the systems level. And then we also could map materials and their alloying elements, steel, aluminium, copper, and magnesium. So having these metal profiles, we could also actually identify a number of technologies driving the critical metals use. So electrification is then far from the only one. So starting at the left-hand side, we could see that tailpipe emission control and catalytic converters was one important driver for certain elements. And then we had lightweighting and safety issues linked to structural metals such as steel and aluminium and their alloying elements. And both these are driven to a large extent by regulations. And then we have other types of technologies that are more pushed by the technical opportunity, so to say, and pushing for more electrics in the vehicles. And there we could find infotainment, various sorts of connectivity, and then moving on to electrification. And now we see a lot of discussions on automation. And with these applications, we also see that we are not only depending on the metals that are on board the vehicles, we also depend on external infrastructure supporting these technologies. So it's a broad mix of different trends driving the critical metals use. And then having these metal profiles and classifying European vehicles in a number of different types, 68 types to be more precise, and then multiplying the profiles with the type and adding all these up, we could show how much elements we have over time in vehicles. So this is what is being put on the market, new light-duty vehicles in Europe over time. And just to comment a bit on the question about imports, this is only what is being put as new vehicles on the market. We also have information on what is being imported from outside the EU, but those flows are quite small. It could have been produced but elsewhere, but it's being put as a new vehicle in the European market. So second-hand import of second-hand vehicles is small. So for gold, we see that we have a large increase until the year 2007 or something like that, where the gray parts, diesel and petrol, stands for well, in practice, all of it. And during this period, we could identify an increase per vehicle in quantity of gold, as well as an increased number of new vehicles on the market, and that accounts for this increase. And then after this point, we could no longer find the evidence for increased quantities per vehicle, and also the number of new vehicles being put on the market was a bit lower. So that is what the decline represents. And then towards well, the more projected part of the data, we can see an assumed increase because also of the new electrified drivetrains, which are the red and yellowish parts. So this is gold. And then we also, as an example, show neodymium, which has a very different pattern, where we see a large and quite steep increase, also again represented by diesel and petrol. But then towards the later parts of this period, we see substantial increases because of the electrified drivetrains. And this is also then, of course, likely to continue if electrification continues as everyone expects. So this is when we look at it over time. So we see that it's really important to understand how the contents in products differ over time, and also that we have to distinguish between different types of vehicles. And here we have only shown the drivetrains, but in fact we are accounting for 68 types and trying as best as we can to find data for it, even though it's difficult. And Armand will talk a bit more about that later on. So what we also can show is how everything plays out over a specific year. So starting from the left, we have placed on the market vehicles entering the European fleet. We have a large fleet, a large material stock in use. And then after 10 to 20 years, it differs between different countries. Vehicles are deregistered, and we have that information, so we can actually account for the more or less exact lifetimes of the vehicles. And what happens afterwards, if we move towards the right-hand side of this picture, is that some of the vehicles are being reported as recycled. So the green box, there we have nearly 8 million tons. But since we know how much is being deregistered and we know how much is being registered as recycling, we also can calculate the gap. And it is quite significant. And the same thing as Johanna was talking about earlier, we have vehicles of unknown whereabouts. And this is a mix of vehicles actually not entering the formal recycling systems or not being registered properly, and also being a consequence of data inconsistencies. So I think that this is also very interesting that we have this large unaccounted for resource potential that we don't know how large it is, but it should be used in a better way than it is today. So by that, I want to hand over to Amund.
Thank you, Maria. So, Maria just showed the importance of vehicles for secondary raw materials and some interesting results. It should also be mentioned that there are some uncertainties and important data gaps regarding secondary raw materials from cars. I'm now going to explain a bit more about which data lie behind these results that you showed, and which data are actually being collected by various institutions. So I'll start with a small overview, and then I will show some concrete examples. So for in-use stocks and new registrations, there is probably better data than for any other product. Every vehicle, as you know, that is permitted to drive on public roads has to be registered in the central vehicle registry of each country. And this includes some technical data about the vehicle, such as engine size, mass, and fuel type. These data are, however, not openly accessible to the public since they include personal information about the owners, but they are compiled and published in aggregated form by Eurostat and various national institutions such as statistical offices. Data on end-of-life vehicles are collected from member states by Eurostat to ensure compliance with the ELV directive. And they are made publicly available. For international trade, we also have data available from Eurostat and UN Comtrade. When it comes to composition, there is actually also a lot of data that is being systematically collected by the automotive industry to ensure compliance with various regulations such as REACH and the ELV directive. But access to these data is very restricted. There are also some commercial information systems like the ones offered by the DOT group, which provide quite detailed information about the functionalities of different vehicle models, which, for example, can tell us which types of electronic devices are present in cars. Finally, there are a few independent studies that are based on sampling and analyzing ELVs that have generated some data about the composition of vehicles. Now I'm going to show some examples of, let's say, the best possible data that we have or may have access to that is related to quantifying secondary raw materials in vehicles. So this first example shows some visualizations of the mass of vehicles in Norway based on detailed data from the Central Vehicle Registry. So to the left, you see the average mass of cars in black as a function of their cohort. The blue, red, and pink lines show the average mass of plug-in hybrids, battery electric vehicles, and hybrid electric vehicles, respectively. And you can see that there has been quite a sharp increase in the last 5 years or so, which might be driven by the switch to electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. As you can see, they have on average a higher mass. On the right, you see two histograms that show the mass distribution for battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, also in Norway. And these red vertical dashed lines show the boundaries between vehicle classifications or vehicle categories used by Eurostat. So that means that in Eurostat, the data that you have access to is, it only gives you the total number of vehicles between two of these red lines. And you can see that the amount of information that you lose by this aggregation is quite substantial, especially for plug-in hybrids. It's extreme because around 99% of the cars are heavier than 1,500 kilograms, so they all end up in the same category. So the second example that I would like to show is about the growing penetration of electronic devices in cars. These two graphs are based on data from a commercial product that lets second-hand car dealers estimate the value of cars. The two examples shown here, which are the stop-start system and the electronic stability control, illustrate quite well the increasing amounts of electronics in cars. There are many more examples of electronic devices that have grown fast in the last decades. And based on these data, we can, of course, say very confidently that amounts of electronics and probably critical metals in end-of-life vehicles are going to grow fast in the coming years. This is based on information for 65,000 different car models, so it gives us a very precise estimate of the total amounts here, but again, these data are not publicly available, but they exist and they are very useful. So until now, I have shown examples of data that gives us very precise knowledge about the stocks and flows of vehicles and components contained in them. Now let's look at data for a particular element. Oops. So gold is a very interesting element because of its high value and that it's commonly present in electronics. But what do we actually know about gold in cars? So this chart shows 11 different estimates of gold content in vehicles. So the mass of gold in one vehicle obtained with different methods. So the blue bars are estimates that are based on material data collected by car manufacturers through the IMDS system, which is the data system that most of the automotive industry uses to keep track of their substances to ensure compliance with regulations. The red bars show estimates that are based on sampling and chemical analysis of ELVs or components taken out of ELVs or waste fractions obtained from shredding ELVs. And obviously the results are very different. So which ones are more correct and why are they so different? We don't know which ones are more correct, but we can say quite confidently that the true average gold content probably lies somewhere between the extremes here. And actually, just for comparison, this is so the mass fraction of gold in cars is pretty much in the same range as the mass fraction of gold in primary mines. So why are these values so different? There are many possible explanations for that. The data that are based on sampling and analysis are likely to underestimate to some extent, since it is impossible to sample and analyze an entire car. So they are based on a selection of hotspots where the researchers believe that most of the gold is contained. Also, those data are based on sampling from older vehicles than the manufacturer's data. But there are also some issues with the manufacturer's data. For example, it is well known that the car manufacturers use so-called umbrella specifications for printed circuit boards, where they use generic compositions instead of the true composition of the electronics, because it's very hard for them to obtain this data from their suppliers. So, quickly said, even the car manufacturers don't really know what's inside the cars. Overall, there is a lot of data being collected about vehicles. I think much more than for any other product, but vehicles are also very complex. And much of the data that are being collected are not available to policymakers or to help inform recycling operations. So what can we do to make some improvements? In ORAMA, we took a closer look at the Eurostat classification for vehicles. We thought the current classification has potential for improvement, and that this shouldn't be too complicated to implement, given that the data that exist in central vehicle registries are very detailed. So currently, these two cars, the e-Golf and the Tesla Model X, belong to the same category of cars for Eurostat, although they are in fact quite different. So, for example, the Tesla has a battery that is twice as big as the e-Golf. So very simply explained, we did a case study to investigate how much our estimates of the battery stock in vehicles would improve if we introduced a classification system that has a better distinction between cars of different sizes. And this is the result. It shows the estimated stock of lithium-ion battery cells in vehicles in Norway and the uncertainty of these estimates. And the estimates have been obtained using 4 different classification systems. So I would like you to look at the second box from the left, the orange one. This was obtained using the current Eurostat classification. Then when we added more mass categories, we get a better resolution for the data on the number of vehicles. And we obtain the box in green here. So you can see that the uncertainty has been reduced quite a bit, and the estimate, so the median, has moved closer to the best estimate, which is shown to the right, the red one. And this red estimate has been obtained by using the most detailed data that we have available, that is coming from the central vehicle registry. So it's really considering individual vehicle models. So in summary, this in orange is what we have publicly available for all EU countries. The estimate in green, this is what we can achieve if we make, I would say, a very small revision to the classification system. And the red is what you can achieve if you are studying an individual country and you have access to data directly from the vehicle registry. So our recommendation is, of course, that Eurostat revises their classification system to include more mass categories. We also have other recommendations that Johan is now going to talk about. So he will talk a little bit about the general recommendations that came out of the work that we did in ORAMA.
Yes, thank you, Armand. You can change slides. So just to wrap up a bit about what has been said, there is a lot of information existing about secondary raw materials in vehicles. However, it's not available in any suitable form to support policy development of or to actors actually working hands-on that could use this data to close the circular flows, such as dismantlers. There is also this problem of the data that can be obtained. It is not harmonized, so it's difficult and costly to interpret it and compare it, which makes it somewhat unsuitable as decision support, or at least provides more uncertainties and risks. There are, as Maria shown, some major data gaps still that we just don't know. We only have guesses. So you can change slide, please. Thank you. So this is a overview of the prioritized and deemed as rather feasible recommended actions we have to improve secondary raw material information in vehicles. I'll just go through them, starting with the orange here, which is to amend the ELV directive to include requirements for reporting vehicle age and drivetrain type. And this is to align the ELV data with the registration data. They are currently not aligned, so we don't know. There's a kind of a misharmonization about how much is leaving the stock and how much is reported to leave the stock, to get grips with this unknown whereabouts mainly. And that, yeah, we can come back to that. So taking the next one is about how do we access this rather large amounts of data about composition that exists, but it's just not available. It is confidential. So what we think is feasible to do, at least, is to start a dialogue, establish a working group with industry stakeholders, together with government representatives from Eurostat, etc., and with help from academic expertise, to explore how this can be done. How can we balance between transparency and confidentiality? And possibly this could lead to, in the future, some kind of digital tools. But the main thing here is to actually establish a organized dialogue and organized working group. There is also quite a lot of data produced by research, such as from this project and from other projects. However, that is rather scattered and in various formats, and it takes time to find it. So we recommend to create some kind of repository where this type of data can be gathered and published and searched. The question is, how do we get all the academics to do that, incentivize people to actually provide data to such a repository? Technically, it's a rather simple thing to do. And finally, we have about reporting on the stock of vehicles and status of registrations. And this is the referring to the classification update that Armand referred to. This reporting of registrations, first of all, is not mandatory. So we recommend that it will become mandatory for countries to actually report this. And also with a small update of this classification, basically just increasing the number of mass categories in increments of 250 kilos. Now it goes up to 1,500 kilos and at least up to 2,500 kilos. Then we would get a rather much higher resolution on this increase due to the increase of mass on average cars. And that relates also to the last one, jumping over the second last one. They improve the quality of data through ensuring robust data verification procedures. This voluntary reporting also means that there's little insight in how member states collect their data and how they ensure the quality. So the recommendation is basically to ensure that there are such harmonized or robust verification processes that can be carried out to have some idea about the quality of data. And finally, in order to know more about these ELV stocks and the unknown whereabouts, not the least, we would need to basically learn more, do research and do studies in countries. Where do these cars go? So that is more of a research effort needed. Yes, I think that is all I have to say here. So please, that would be all from us, from the vehicle team. Thank you very much, and I leave it to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Maria, Yuan, and Amund for the excellent presentations. We will go ahead and take some questions in regards to the ELV section. One question from Marte Skare. She's wondering about the reference used for some of the slides, which is Wagner et al. 2019. So she's asking where can she find this information?
Yes, so I see that she has seen it now. So that's actually a deliverable report from the ORAMA project, and it is available from the ORAMA webpage. So you can go to the webpage and you find it there. It's deliverable D23. I think if it was the 2019A.
Yeah, yes. And the second one is to be published within a month, we hope.
Oh,
exactly.
the final report.
The second one is the final report. Yeah.
If you have any further questions, please go ahead. We still have 15 minutes, so. No questions?
Yeah, if nobody's asking, I have and this is directed towards Amund. You showed very nicely and clearly the limitations that we have with the current vehicle classification, that we don't get at the core of what we would like to know about all the raw materials in the batteries. And your recommendation, if I understand you correctly, is to have then the weight parallel to the fuel type, also as a first step. And I was wondering, what about directly the battery size or the battery weight? For gasoline-driven cars, we have also the cubic centimeter as an indicator for the size of the engine. Why not directly going at the battery size?
Yes, that is a good question. actually, there are one of our recommendations would also be to include something like that, the battery size or a characteristic of the car that can tell us something about the battery size, for example, now what is reported is the engine size, which is irrelevant for electric vehicles. So one could report the power instead, for example. So I think we have to kind of divide into different types of recommendations here. So what we recommended regarding the different mass categories, that is something that should be very easy to implement, because this information is already collected in the individual countries. So every country records data about the mass of the vehicles, but they don't necessarily record information about the battery size. So to make this possible, especially if you want to do this on a European level, then all the countries would first have to start collecting this information in their central vehicle registries. So we only worked with data from Norway, and actually there they have started collecting data on the power of the cars. I think they also do that in Switzerland, actually. But I had a look at the data, and actually it's not good quality yet. So there were many mistakes. So that's why that would also be very nice. I agree, to report the battery size or the power or other relevant characteristics of the car, but the primary data doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, thanks. It's clear.
Another question from Regina Kohlmeyer. She thinks that the statistical situation can only be improved by improving the legal framework for vehicles registration and the registration systems in Europe. So do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, to a large extent, I think so. That for real changes to happen, there has to be some. Has to be driven by government policies, I think.
Thank you, Amund. Are there further questions? Oh yes, Sigurd Heiberg. I understand that information is unstructured and available in many cases. Is there a cost to address the decision that criticality depends on accurate data in order to distinguish important from unimportant information?
I don't understand the question. Maybe Sigurd can also explain a bit more.
Well, maybe I can try to answer, to give one of the examples that we have been talking about in our group, is to say that we have different types of decisions that require different types of information. So when it comes to overall policies and the direction of policies in general, what we have information, what we know already now is more likely sufficient, but when the further down to the concrete actions or the closer to the concrete actions that we get, towards recycling and dismantling, where you really have to know exactly what components and so to pick the more detailed information you need to have. So it really depends on what type of decision we are aiming for. I don't know if this answers the question or not.
In case you have any further questions, Sigurd, you can unmute your microphone and address the question. Well, I think she was pleased with the question then. If you have any further questions, as I mentioned before, you can just unmute your microphone and address the presenters. So I guess everyone, everything was very cleared. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We wish to thank you again for joining us today. If you wish to have more information regarding the content of the presentations or more information on the monitoring of material flows of other waste groups, please feel free to check out the ORAMA webpage and join us in our final event as well on the 22nd of November during the Raw Material Weeks in Brussels. In addition, if you are interested in knowing more on data optimization for secondary raw materials from WE and WE in general and PV panels in particular, please join us tomorrow in our webinar at the same time. Furthermore, we will be as well participating and presenting the e-waste expo on the 14th to 15th of November in Frankfurt. So if you wish to join us and contact us, and please feel free to join our presentations. Johanna Emmerich, Christine Sperlich, and I will be there presenting we PV panels and batteries, and we will be also shortly mentioning something relevant information about ELV. And can you put the next slide? Oh, thank you. And as I mentioned, all presentations, webinar recordings, protocols, guidelines, and relevant information can be found in the webpage. And we will as well like to ask you to provide us with feedback, comments of the webinar. So we will be sending you an email asking for feedback. So please, we would like to know what you think about the webinars, and if you would like to have some further information, or if you will have any inputs with the classifications proposed and recommendations, we would like to hear from you. And thank you, Amund, Maria, Yuan, Johanna, for the excellent presentations, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for the nice moderation. And thanks everybody for participating.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you from my side too.
Thank you very much.
And from me as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too.